Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of a Data Leadership podcast. Today I'm joined by Mark Pybus. He's a data practice director at Contino, an experienced technology leader of many years now. And we're going to be talking today around when the data challenge meets the organizational challenge. And we're going to be shedding some light on some of Mark's experiences during his time at Contino as well. How are you getting on, Mark? How are you coping?
Thank you, Richard. How are we coping? Well, as we all know, it's been a year and counting now that we have been variously working from home, trying to keep kids out of your office, hoping that your friends and family are well and keeping well. But I have to say, I am a lot better this week because the sun's been shining. I've been
There you
outside
go.
in the garden. There's even been some people coming around and saying hi. So talking to people that are my family.
Just the basics then. Sun, talking to people. Yeah, and unfortunately I do think, like everyone's saying, it is going to start snowing as well. So we'll have to see. Maybe when this goes out, we'll have known by then. But yeah, we're obviously going to talk about an interesting topic today. I think just before diving into that, what would be good to do is just get an understanding of how you got into data in the first place, your sort of journey so far, and go from there.
Yeah, so I think my journey is really a journey into tech and what you can do with tech. So I started working as a programmer actually back in the 90s, which probably puts me on the top end of the age range, I would say. That my first role actually was working on a back-end data system. You know, back when we had databases, but to be frank, you know, they hadn't changed for many years. It predates NoSQL. And it was a good grounding on how to program data systems. I didn't always stay in data. I actually had stints when I wasn't even tech facing. I was more business facing. And I think that I've had that background of, you know, I enjoy technology and I enjoy coding, but I actually probably enjoy more what you can do with technology. So along the way, yes, I've learned a lot of languages and I've built apps and run many websites, but I've been focused on the business as well. So I've got a MBA, which I have picked up along the way as like, well, and for me, it's always been the value that you can do with tech. I found myself throughout my career coming back into data, and then really when I was asked by Skybet to build their big data platform as part of Skybet being separated from Sky. That really came back into what was then the big data world, and from then into the data science world as well. And again, it's actually the fact, what can you do with tech to deliver value into the business? And the opportunity to do that with data is absolutely brilliant. So I've got this great grounding in tech, but actually, in fact, quite enjoy working on the business side of things as well. I'm working for Contino now. So Contino is a cloud-based transformation consultancy. So we work with a lot of enterprise clients to help them on the journey to transform at a technical level, and usually from a cloud native point of view, to be able to serve their customers better. And it's really about actually creating that value in the business using tech. And data is a large part of that as well. I've been at Contino now for 3 years. And I sometimes call myself an accidental consultant because I'll be honest, I never intended to become a consultant. A opportunity came up and I was sold on, you know, okay, so I'll be helping out a large bank with some of their data challenges and helping them organize to make better use of data. Actually, that does sound like the thing that I do for the for firms I had worked with in the past. I've now been doing that role for like 3 years. I've worked with many different sizes and different domains of firms. And really sort of realize that I do quite enjoy acting as a consultant and bringing the experiences that I've had from across my years and across the different firms that I have worked with. And also it's great, being able to work with many different challenges as well.
Yeah, exactly that. It sounds like you were pretty much set up to be a consultant given the background. And it's funny how you sort of gravitated towards it. To be honest, I never thought I'd be a recruitment consultant. I definitely didn't come out thinking, that's what I want to go on and be. But yeah, sometimes you do gravitate towards the things that you're good at, and it's lucky that you have enjoyed it. And I do think one of the big benefits, by the sounds of it, is the variation you get, the different businesses that you can help and support, rather than maybe just working for the one and being the SME sort of within that organization.
Certainly, it's like, I think that we are all the sum of what we have learned, what we have experienced. And there becomes a point in, well, at least in my life, you go, actually, I have got a lot of experience. I have learned a lot of things, I remember when I made that decision to become a consultant, and I asked, some of my old mentors, I never really saw myself as being able to do that role, and they said, but why you explain technical concepts, you have caused change to happen in the organizations that you have worked with. You've always moved, the firms that they now work for forwards. This is what you do, and sometimes it takes somebody to tell you you can do that role, to give you the self-belief to be able to do that.
Did you, out of interest, did you have someone that you like modeled yourself as a consultant? So did you know a consultant or someone who'd been successful in that area that actually you did think, that's a good route to go?
I think there was a couple of consultants I had worked with. I'd had some bad experiences and some good experiences. And, that helped to teach me, because obviously if you come into consultancy at an early age, you haven't sat on the other side of that particular table. And I had appointed, employed, and sometimes even fired consultancies for firms which I had worked with.
Yeah.
So that probably helped me understand. And I was very good at already being able to read the people that I was working with and understand, are they just trying to sell me a service here and they don't really care, or are they actually going to add and actually help me solve the problems which I have? So that experience helped me. So I had a couple of friends that were consultants that I spoke to. But I find it hard to just pick one or two people and say that's who I want to be.
No, interesting. And so going back to, I suppose, the topic of the chat today, with it being, when the data challenge meets the organizational challenge, let's dig into that a little bit. What do we actually mean by, I suppose, the data challenge?
The data challenge. I think if you go back to where we really started talking about data as enabling a business and moving on from that traditional relational database and BI, it's what's now a little bit of a data term, which is big data. And in big data, we have the 4 or the 5 V's. So for those of you that haven't lived in the big data world like myself, it was really a way of explaining, why big data was different from the previous data challenges that firms had. And they were expressed as the V's as volume, so the amount of data. And that is still, even now, that is absolutely key. There are some stats around on the internet about how much percentage of the world's data has been created in the last, 2, 3, 5 years. And it's something crazy, like in the last 5 years, 90% of the world's data has been created. That's a massive growth. So there's volume, velocity, it's faster. In actual fact, that is true, because nowadays we don't want to wait. We require information at our fingertips now.
Impatient.
In the past, you would place an order and you could wait for somebody to receive your slip of paper and type it into a system. Now you order, and if it hasn't processed in 3 seconds, you're wondering what's going on. Variety and veracity and also value round off those 4 or 5 V's. People very there. Value is the one that was added on, really, and I think that is actually a really important one, because I like to remind people there's no actual value in data. Value is in what you do with data and what decisions and actions you can take and the knowledge that you've got out of that data. So there's lots of technical challenges regarding just how do you store and process and actually get that knowledge out of that data. But then actually it's also that you need to be able to apply that. And obviously, we've seen a massive trend in data science. Now, interestingly, I think a lot of people forget that the data science approach, or what you might call advanced analytics in itself, as in, finding ways to solve business problems with large quantities of data, isn't actually new. An awful lot of the stats and the algorithms and even neural networks that underpin data science, they also aren't new. So why do we talk about them so much now? And simply, our systems, our infrastructure, our hardware and our software have caught up with what the theory was. So now we can do a lot more with data. So there is, a lot more challenge to make use of that. We're starting to see, we are seeing, there is an arms race in what a organization can do with data. And especially when talking about data science, if you have the better algorithms, you will have a better business. If you can do more with data, if your data is of a better quality, your business will perform better. Now, that's right. I think it's more than that. It isn't performing better. It's that if you can't keep up with that data trend and being, for want of a buzzword, a data-driven organization, if you can't keep up with where the market is going, your company will go backwards. So you've got that arms race in there as well. So there's a lot of challenges there, and I think one final thought on this is that the data challenge has changed over the decades I've been working in data. The challenge used to be, how can we use the data to describe our organization? So how many widgets did we sell yesterday or the previous week? As time has gone on, it's then been more about, actually, can we predict how many of those widgets we can sell tomorrow or next week? But now we have advancements beyond there. It's actually fact, can we use that data and that knowledge to go beyond predicting, to be able to prescribe what actions to take automatically? And nowhere do you see that better than in stock trading, where, as we all know, the rise of the actual algorithms doing the trading, has been, for better or not, it's changed that whole landscape. And that's been borne out from industry to industry. Descriptive to predictive to prescriptive. That sort of journey, how the use of data has changed. Doing that is not easy, and that adds a lot to what I would call the data challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot to think about, and it's changed so much, and you have to keep ahead of it. And like you said, it's everyone trying to get that competitive edge, isn't it? That arms race that's going on. And what you're saying is that needs to, I suppose, meet the organizational challenge. So what does that look like? What are the key factors in that?
Yeah, so you've got that data challenge. a lot of the change that is underpinning that is the changes from a technology point of view. So we've moved through having Hadoop and big data into now cloud, and that unlimited and flexible, that unlimited and very flexible use of compute and of storage. But as you said, the organizational challenge, the technology changes, and it can change rapidly, and the capabilities that you can add from a data point of view are changing quicker than I think most people can keep up with. But actually, from a organizational point of view, so I speak to the likes of CDOs and CIOs and CEOs, and one of the things that you do hear, so like I said, is we need to be data driven, or we have to make better use of data, or we need data scientists. And to give an example of where that becomes challenging, I was consulting with an organization a little while ago, and they were starting their data transformation. Now, what was good about that is that I had recognized it was data transformation. They started with saying, okay, now, so we need to do more data. Let's go get some data scientists. How many do we need? Well, we've got a budget for 70. Let's go hire 70. And I'm sat there in the corner in my listening mode thinking, I'm not too sure what your data platforms are like. What am I going to do with 70 data scientists? And with respect to that particular company, they focused on the platform to be built and the data people. Okay. However, the organizational change to make use of data, because your organization is full of individuals which are doing sort of like roles. And sometimes I go into firms, I do sometimes see poor data systems and a poor organizational use of data. But then I step back and think, I might think it's poor, but they've built a X billion pound business based on that. So obviously working
must be doing all right.
As well. They must be doing something by it, and the organization is making use of what they have. So you have this challenge in a organization that wants to make better use of data. But when we say make better use of data, that's to be able to get knowledge. And that knowledge generally has to go into individuals that have to be able to receive that. So to be frank, I can build the best data platform going, but if nobody uses it, it's not worth anything. So, we talk about data literacy, democratizing access to data, and that's certainly part of the data challenge. I've seen really good work from a data point of view. So if you were to go to a person running a factory and say, we've done all these great things with data from your machines and what your throughput is, and we're going to tell you that you should take some downtime next Thursday to work on this particular machine because we're going to predict it's going to break in the next 25 days. Yeah, that's fine. That factory man that's wearing a pair of overalls and services his machine every 9 months probably is going to look at that spreadsheet he gets, or however he receives that information, and go, nah, Big Bertha's going to carry on working for at least another 3 months. I'm not touching it. And I've seen pretty much that happen. But also data transcends the organizational boundaries that we are used to working with. So for an organization to really make the best use of data, it needs to be joining up different data sources. We often talk about things such as Conway's law. Now, Conway basically said that when you design a computer system, organization design a computer system that fits their organizational structure. And what that means is that if you were to say we want to do a lot with data and we need to be storing data and doing big data systems, and you have 4 different divisions, you will probably end up with 4 different solutions in each of those divisions. It doesn't matter how hard you try not to, The organization will follow the patterns it's already have. And the way that those systems will communicate won't be seamless. It'll be because how they communicate from division to division at the moment. And that's probably not how you're going to make the best use of your data. So there is a challenge there in that when you try to build what might be a well-architected or well-modeled data system for a large-scale enterprise, if you don't think how that fits into your organization, either it will be built differently, or what actually sometimes happens, if you don't sympathetically design that to fit, the organization itself will reject it. It will go, well, I don't need that. And also how we insensitize and measure people's performance in a divisional structure, or whatever silos we are working with, is probably not conducive to the sharing of data. Actually, sometimes it's the exact opposite. If you've got 4 divisions, they are to a certain extent competing. Nobody wants to be the last division, because that's been the one that's going to be on the naughty step or sold off. And so you obviously would like to be top, but you definitely don't want to be bottom. So you have that certain competition going sort of like in there as well. So I'm probably making it sound a little bit like I lost like cause here, but in actual fact, that's because you don't just need to look at the data challenge, how you solve that from a technical point of view, but how does the organization need to change to make better use of data?
And do you feel, it's a really good point. And do you feel that organizations at the moment, or a lot of organizations, aren't maybe thinking of putting enough time thinking and planning about the organizational piece as well? What's been your experiences?
Yeah, so there's obviously a little bit of bias from a observer point of view here, because often I am actually called upon, or Contino is, when there's been plans to do something with data, and it's to look at it from a technical point of view. And often it can be a little bit of a shock where I say, well, it looks like you're building a data platform. What's the organizational changes going to look like? You went, oh, we don't care about those. I know you do have to care. You have to care very quickly, very, very quickly as well. If you don't think about the impact on the individual, if you don't understand from the senior level how your organization is going to make use of data and ensure it has the backing and the change needed. So, if it is a data platform that is going to, some of the things we talk about when we come to the use of data is the ability to revolutionize how a business perceives itself. So how it can observe how well it is performing, and then the decisions it will take to make that performance better. Or potentially it can be using data to innovate, to break into new markets, or to serve a different set of customers. Those are business changes. They are organizational changes. So when you're talking about a large-scale data-led transformation, you're actually talking about a organization and a business transformation as well. And without understanding that at the beginning and taking steps to account for that, the actual data challenge, doesn't matter how great you can be in solving that, it will be trying to push that data and push that knowledge and information uphill or against a organization that is resisting that change.
Yeah, and it's all about adoption, and how successful it's going to be is, people's understanding of how to use that system. People are going to use it effectively. Like you say, the data literacy piece as well, which is something that, from my experience, not enough organizations put a lot of time into to build out their organizations' understanding. And when you're working with new tech and new ways of doing things, really important.
Oh yes, absolutely. And I love talking about data platforms, it may show, but actually, oddly, when I've been asking my questions about the organizational challenges, I normally actually start looking at data governance, which, yes, it's important, but if you get data governance well, you can actually open up your user data, because data governance actually has to include the users of the data. It has to include actually making that data accessible. So it's fine having data literacy and having people understand data. If they don't know where the data is and can't get access to that data, you've just wasted a whole load of training time and culture sort of like change. So I think that one of the pillars that comes into actually making a really good data transformation project is the cultural change and the data literacy, or democratizing access to data, which are linked concepts. And it's been really modern on the data governance approach. And yes, underpinning that is a modern data platform. But I've seen too many organizations that have spent some good money on a modern data platform, and often then gone and employed 70 data scientists as well, and haven't got the return out of it they were potentially hoping for.
And this could be one of those reasons, basically, that maybe they've not thought about how that's going to integrate into the organization and who's going to be affected and all that type of thing.
It's change comes down to people, and people on a individual level actually rarely want to change, rarely like change. I'm not saying that's like some slightly do, but anybody that has run a transformation project of any kind, will actually know that finding ways to enable people to change in a safe manner is really important. And sometimes organizations need a shock there as well. I think I've worked with one company recently in the financial services space. And they have been talking and looking, and to be fair, investing in data for a slight while. Their competitors were just doing it an awful lot better, and their competitors were more efficient. They were undercutting them. They were targeting their customers on an individual level. I think for obvious reasons, I'm not going to go into this particular sector, because you might start to realize who I am talking about. They are definitely a household name. And the CEO of that firm stood up in front of everybody in a company-wide town hall and said, "These are our figures. We are declining year on year, and our costs are going up year on year. Our competitors' graphs look like this," and that's a shock, and that actually starts to unfreeze the company and social constructs that were stopping them from being able to change. It was right then, we have to tackle this, otherwise fundamentally this firm, or this part of firm, will be sold off by our parent organization in the future at some point. It's just going to disappear. So how are we going to do that is we're going to run these sort of like programs, and one of those programs was focused on data, but sometimes it needs that shock to unfreeze a firm, so you can start to build new ways of working. And in that particular example, yes, I'll be fair, there were probably a few eggs broken along the sort of like way, but it did start to put the leadership and the vision in there to say, we need to find new ways of doing this. We can't lose what was a many millions of pounds per year servicing customer base. And for the leader of your company to come out and say that, then when somebody comes to you and says, right then, we're going to change how we price, you're no longer going to be using that spreadsheet. you're going to be using your output from this machine learning algorithm and this large scale data system. You will be happier then than to find out that you had somebody that potentially can actually be doing your job better than you can do the job. Because obviously, data is also a threat sometimes. We like to talk about the benefits of data, but if you have the individual who is realizing that well-crafted spreadsheet that has got 5 years of tweaks to it that you have to run and manipulate and fix every week that you run it, and it's sort of like 2 or 3 days of your time per week, but then it gives you the pricing changes that goes into the stores. If you then find out that actually fact we're now able to alter those prices almost on the fly, or at least every day, and they are more accurate and we're making a better margin on them, you've just lost 3 days of your job, and you're probably wondering what you're going to be doing going forwards. So you have to understand those changes as well.
Yeah, and this is it. So it's obviously a potential problem when you're going and implementing a data platform or taking on whatever project it is thinking about the business side. And why do you think there is maybe problems with it? What are the challenges that are faced when people are, I suppose, considering the organizational challenge?
So absolutely top has to be looking at the data challenge and not looking at the organizational challenge.
They just simply don't consider it.
Yeah, absolutely. So simple. I have seen a lot of central data teams and central data platforms that are well funded, but at the business level ineffective, because that's where the investment has gone, and it hasn't the actual use of that platform, or the integration into that platform, hasn't taken into the other aspects of the business. It's normally a good story to tell, and it would definitely have delivered some value, but it wouldn't have been the transformational change that was hoped for. And it can sometimes be, how should I put this? It can sometimes be it can sometimes feel like an easy way to fix a systematic problem is to build a new team or have a new business function. I was almost going to say a lazy way of doing it, because it's certainly lazy isn't lazy. It certainly isn't cheap. But it's probably easier to get back and forth at, say, a board level. And it's probably easier then to measure the actual outputs of that particular team, and to fund it and to actually run it. The problem is it's also less effective. And yes, certainly, there are constructs where that central data team works sort of like, well, I haven't got anything particular. I'm not particularly against having central teams, but sometimes that actually ends up being a central silo, and it just perpetuates probably some of the problems that are underlying the business problems anyway, from having silos.
When do you feel the conversation needs to happen when it comes to thinking about this data challenge versus the organizational challenge? Is it literally at the beginning of the process? Is it, when does that need to happen?
I think it's certainly easier at the beginning of a process, but it's probably one of those things that needs to happen constantly and throughout the life cycle of that data project or program. I come back to some of my earliest experiences in tech, and now we're certainly much better at speaking to business owners about technology. And I think also with the unfortunate events of the last year, everybody's, you don't have to work in business to understand that making decision based on data and on our figures and the number of cases is, important. And, I think we've all been well skilled now on what an exponential growth is, but going back to my early days, you had business owners that didn't care about tech because they were used to buying typewriters and they just needed to buy more expensive, quicker typewriters. But you also had technology people that wrote code. They didn't build systems and they weren't focused on outcomes. And I think that we're changing. I think as an industry we are maturing, and I think obviously it's much more common now to have technology leaders at the head of companies. I started working in the 1990s and software development wasn't really talked about at board level, I would have thought, for most of the firms that I was working with then. So we are much more used to having the conversation about technology and business value together. But I think we also need to extend that at that senior level into the organizational change and the organizational constructs as well. So in answer to your question, it needs to start early. It needs to start at that top level, but actually it needs to continue all of the way down. And that data engineer that's working on transforming some data, or the analyst or the data scientist that's going to be using that data, they need to be equally aware of what impact they are having on the business and who's going to be using that data. I've learned this the hard way when I've understood the business problem, and the team has gone on, they have solved that business problem using data, and we've been very happy with ourselves, very pleased with ourselves. But turned out that the business team that we needed to make use of that data has ignored it. Go back after a month and you find, I think I had an absolute classic on that one firm that said, "Oh, I don't suppose you've got some people that can help us do this. We need to analyze this data, and the person that does it, they do it every 2 weeks, and he's off, and we haven't got the skills." You couldn't boast someone. I'm going, you got all that data in your data lake. It was marketing data. And they went, "Well, yeah, but we don't know how to access it." "I'll get used to it." I said, and it was literally a simple case of, they actually fixed this problem for you a year ago. I actually went back and found the ticket where that particular problem had been fixed a year ago and marked as complete. And it's a simple case of finding the query and running the query and saying, "Here's the answers. Would you like them emailed to you every 2 weeks, or do you want a dashboard?" And it was one of those crazy things where you think, actual fact, the tech team did a job really well and they fixed the business problem, but nobody was actually looking on actually making sure that the business was using that solution.
Yeah. That sums it up, doesn't it? It sums up what you're saying. It's just so key, and it sounds like a communication problem more than anything.
Yeah, communication and change. I think would it help if I actually talked about where I have seen it work well, and the things which form the better projects, because obviously it's easy for me to talk about things where it hasn't gone well, but I wouldn't still be in a job if I didn't have some great great positive examples and I think we've talked about the need to actually have both a top down and a bottom up view of this. At the top level, having the agent for the organizational change in there, and sometimes where you have a data program that's part of a transformation agenda, and there's sometimes already a transformation director on the board anyway, and they're already tackling the change which is needed, that can then be really handy for the data program to be part of. So you need that leadership to help make the overall change happen. You need to understand that it's the individual and make sure that, you know, the communication is there all of the time. Not avoiding the difficult questions. So sometimes one of the errors made is, you know, people will tell you this isn't going to work because that team over here wants to build their own data platform and they don't want to use it. They're not really giving us the data that we need, and we built this thing for them, but they don't want to use it. You know,
it's a common story,
yeah,
I think.
that is a senior management problem that will generally be traced back down to politics at some senior level. So then the data program needs that senior stakeholder, be that the CDO or the CEO, whoever is needed, to actually almost be able to reach down into there and say, you will cooperate, or sometimes what's needed in, we're going to change the structure of that part of the business because it's acting against itself. You know, change isn't easy. You know, these things I'm talking about, they are individuals in there, but you know, that's how change is needed as well. When it comes down to actually talking about how you go about building the data construct, so I've touched on the need for education, data literacy, and that side of things. That's about making sure you have a wider base of people that understand data. What actually goes hand in that is actually treating the data offering. So I have habit of saying data platform a lot. It's a data capability. It's not just the technology in there. It's actually the systems of people and the processes that make up being able to make use of data. If you treat that as a product, so think about the users. Who's going to be using this? How can they access this? What are their problems? What are their needs? Do user testing. You know, bring in the voice of the user. So when I used to build, you know, go back to the early days of iPhone, I was working on such apps such as Big Brother, or I don't know, Big Brother 12 or something like that. So we would do user testing. Actual fact, we would try and get a voice of the user rep into our Scrum teams. You know, we built these in an agile way, you know, and when, you know, it's easy to have a program work that is a data platform that, believe it or not, doesn't have a voice of the end user in there, doesn't actually bring in those people. So treating data as a product is important. And I touched on agile there. You know, sometimes there's a tendency, especially on the larger scale data platforms, to do a certain amount of thinking and planning. Now that's needed. You know, you need to understand what it is you're building and why, and you actually need to plan what it is going to look like and who's going to be building it. But sometimes that actually carries on for too long. And, you know, if you are still planning after 6 months, after a year, after 18 months, and I've seen even longer, your technology is changing on you anyway, and your business is changing, the world is changing. But there's probably deep-seated reasons why you haven't been able to sort of like move on. You're actually better off to start early and learn and spend some of that time and some of that cost on actual fact starting to use data. And one of the things that I like to do is rather than look at the inside of your data platform, so the data lake and how you get data in and out of that, is to start at the outside, start with a business use of data, not just a generic use, and that actually key. You know, we want to be able to identify customers that are going to churn, for example, as a use case, and work out what information, what knowledge you need to be able to actually, first of all, work out what actions you would take to be able to retain those customers. Because actually, a classic mistake from a data science point of view is being able to tell, for example, a business that these customers are going to churn, which sounds very useful. The business can't take any action to stop them churning. It's just a waste of effort, you know. So what actions would the business take to stop that person from churning? And by churn, it's somebody that was a customer is no longer a customer. You know, is it they can be offered a special offer or somebody can phone them up? If they have an action that they can take, then what knowledge is needed to be able to, in that case, identify that customer? What data is needed to be able to bring that knowledge, and then what sort of platforms needed, and obviously where is the source of that data? If you start building from the outside in, you generally actually spend less, you build a smaller tech platform, and is more effective. So, if you start early by building from the outside in on specific use cases, you still need a plan, a master plan, you still need a vision for your platform. But it's much quicker for you to be able to start using that platform and getting business value from it. That makes transformation a hell of a lot easier anyway, if you can point to a success early on, or many sort of like of them. But also, you need to do this in an agile way. So you need to learn, you need to iterate. You need to do user testing. So if you want to do a data catalog, and I've seen lots of specs for data catalogs, not a lot of them have thought about the user interface for the end user. That's probably the thing that's going to make the most difference to the end user. So something, prototype one and show it to the end user, get them in to try to find some data. So if you can do that, and then remember it's a organizational change throughout everything that you are doing, and everybody aware of that, and then focus on the use of data, your chances of success and actually of your data challenge meeting the organizational challenge, the organization changing, becoming the data-driven organization that everybody wants, is so much higher, and the improvement is marked. And do it well. And I don't have a job to come in after it's failed after 18 months and tell you where it all went wrong.
There you go. Yeah, I think you've summarized it really well there. I mean, what just as a final point, I suppose, if you're a data leader and you're either embarking on integrating a new data platform, whatever project it is, where would you start with that to make sure that first step in making sure that the data challenge meets the organizational challenge, if there is a single point? Is it just getting out and actually starting that conversation and trying to voice that beforehand? Or
I think if you're a senior level in an organization, it's probably conversations which are becoming easier, because data is now known to be important. I personally would like to see that data leader talking to their peers and make them excited about the opportunities in data. That is what excites me, but also, I've just spent the last, I don't know how long, talking about data, and I've probably said the word data, umpteen.
Let's count it.
But in actual fact, a real key data leader will actually be talking about the business. Because fundamentally, data is actually worthless, but the knowledge to run your business better, that can be priceless. So that's what a real key data leader does, to have the conversation, is actually talk about the business. And when they've found those problems, how to improve the business with data, then they can talk about data.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. Do it from the beginning, and then like you said earlier, it's that continuous conversation as time goes on as well. It's the being able to adapt to the situations that come up and all the challenges that you've discussed as well. It's not an easy thing to do, but by the sounds of it, the conversation's getting easier.
Yes, yeah, it certainly is.
Definitely. Brilliant. Well, look, I really appreciate your time today, Mark. It's been really good hearing about your experiences, and let's keep in touch.
It's been great. Thank you very much, Richard.